The crystal towers of Centauri Prime reached toward the purple sky like giant fingers made of pure light. Inside the largest tower, beings from 47 different worlds sat around a massive table that glowed with soft blue energy. Commander HFY of the Altarian fleet stood at the center of the room, his silver skin reflecting the light, as he spoke about the war that had been destroying the galaxy for 300 years. The Keith Empire and the Vorlon Confederacy had been fighting each other for so long that most beings could not remember why it started. Entire star systems had been turned into graveyards of broken ships and dead planets. Billions of innocent people had lost their homes, their families, and their lives because two powerful groups could not find peace. HFY activated a holographic display that showed the latest battle reports. Red dots marked where the Keth forces had attacked civilian ships. Blue dots showed where Vorlon raiders had destroyed trading posts. The map was covered in so many colored dots that it looked like a disease spreading across the galaxy. "We are losing this war," HFY said in his deep voice, not to the enemy but to the war itself. "Every day we fight, we become more like the monsters we claim to oppose." An old female from the scholarly Yith species raised one of her forearms. High Scholar Yithara was the oldest being in the council, having lived for over 800 years. Her people were known for keeping detailed records of everything that happened in the galaxy. "I have been studying our ancient archives," she said slowly. "There are stories from the early days of space travel about a species called humans. The records are incomplete and many scholars believe they are just myths, but the descriptions are very strange." The other council members shifted in their seats. Everyone had heard whispers of these mysterious humans, but most thought they were just tales told to frighten children or entertain bored travelers. Yithara continued speaking as she projected old images onto the main display. The pictures showed strange bipedal creatures with hair on their heads and no natural weapons like claws or fangs. According to these records, humans were said to be physically weak compared to most species. They had no thick armor plating, no poison glands, no ability to survive in space without protection. Yet the stories claim they were among the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. A representative from the Corvin military laughed. "How could such weak creatures be dangerous? Even our children are stronger than these mythical beings appear to be." "That is what makes the story so interesting," Yithara replied. "The humans supposedly won battles not through strength or advanced technology, but through something the records call tactics and determination. They would use their environment as a weapon, turn their enemies' strengths into weaknesses, and never surrender even when facing impossible odds." On the other side of the galaxy, far from the council chambers, Dr. Kelvin Reeves was brushing dirt away from what looked like a metal tablet covered in strange markings. He was part of a research team exploring ancient ruins on a dead world that had been forgotten for thousands of years. The planet was officially designated as Research Site 7, but the team just called it The Rock because it was mostly barren stone and dust. Kelvin worked carefully with his tools, trying not to damage the artifact. His pilot, Jake Morrison, was keeping watch nearby while their communications officer, Lisa Carter, recorded everything with her scanner. They had been on the rock for 6 months, and this was their most interesting discovery yet. "Lisa, are you getting clear images of these symbols?" Kelvin asked as he held up the tablet. "Yes, and the computer is trying to match them against our language databases," Lisa replied. "But so far it cannot identify what they mean or what species created them." Jake walked over to look at the tablet. He was not a scientist like the others, but he had seen many different alien writings during his years as a pilot. "These markings look familiar somehow. I think I have seen something like this before, but I cannot remember where." Lisa's scanner made a soft beeping sound. The computer found a partial match. These symbols appear in some very old Altarian records that mention something called humans, but those are just legend files, not historical documents. Kelvin felt his heart beating faster. If these artifacts were real evidence of the legendary humans, it would be the greatest discovery in galactic archaeology. He carefully placed the tablet in a protective container and looked around the ruins for more clues. The ancient structures were built in a style that no current species used. The doorways were the right size for bipedal creatures about 2 meters tall. The rooms had furniture that suggested beings who sat in chairs rather than floating or crouching like most modern species. Everything about the ruins suggested that whoever lived here was very different from any known galactic civilization. "We need to search every building," Kelvin told his team. If this really is evidence of humans, we could change how everyone thinks about galactic history. Meanwhile, on the bridge of a Keth battleship, Warmaster Sektar was planning his next attack against a Vorlon supply convoy. The Keth were a warrior species with thick gray skin and multiple arms that ended in sharp claws. They believed that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe, and they had been very successful in their war against the Vorlons. But lately, Sektar had been hearing strange reports from his field commanders. They spoke of unusual energy signatures detected in empty space, of ancient derelict ships being found with technology that no one could identify, and of old data cores that contained references to unknown species. Perhaps we should investigate these anomalies, suggested his second-in-command. If there are lost technologies to be found, they could give us an advantage in the war. Sektar considered this idea. The Keth had always been proud of their military might, but the war with the Vorlons had been going on for so long that both sides were running out of ships and soldiers. Any advantage would be welcome, even if it came from studying old legends and myths. Send scout ships to investigate these energy signatures, he ordered. If there are weapons or ships to be salvaged, I want them found before the Vorlons discover them. Neither the Galactic Council, nor the research team, nor the Keth commanders knew that their galaxy was about to change forever. In the depths of space, far beyond the edge of known worlds, something was stirring. The legends were about to become reality, and the universe would never be the same again. Admiral Connor Blake stood on the bridge of the Starship Endeavour and watched the stars stretch into lines of light as his ship jumped faster than light for the first time in human history. After decades of wars on Earth and years of struggling to repair their damaged planet, humanity had finally built ships that could travel between the stars. The mission was simple but historic: find out if humans were alone in the universe. The jump lasted only a few seconds, but when the stars returned to normal points of light, everything had changed. They were no longer in the solar system where Earth waited. They were somewhere completely new, in a region of space that their telescopes had only seen as distant specks of light. "Jump successful, Admiral," reported Navigation Officer Pete Collins. "We are now 43 light-years from Earth in the system we designated as Target Alpha." Blake nodded and looked around at his crew. These were the best people Earth could provide. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, and explorers who had volunteered for a journey that might last years or even decades. They all knew they might never see home again, but they also knew that someone had to take the first step into the unknown. "Begin standard scanning procedures," Blake ordered. "I want to know everything about this system. Planets, asteroids, any signs of life or technology." 3 days later, Captain Sam Rodriguez received new orders aboard his scout ship Aurora. His smaller vessel had been designed for speed and stealth, perfect for investigating anything unusual that the main fleet discovered. His crew was small but experienced. Engineer Maya Thompson, who could fix anything, Tactical Officer Ben Walsh, who had served in the Earth Defense Forces, and Dr. Claire Foster, who specialized in studying alien life forms that might exist somewhere in the galaxy. "We have detected unusual energy readings from the Wolf 359 system," Blake's message explained. "Your mission is to investigate and report back. Be careful out there, Sam. We do not know what we might find." The Aurora made its own faster-than-light jump and arrived in a system where 2 yellow stars orbited each other in a cosmic dance. The energy readings were stronger here, and Maya's instruments showed signs of artificial technology somewhere nearby. "Captain, I am picking up what looks like a damaged spacecraft about 2 million kilometers from our position," Ben reported from his tactical station. "The design is completely unknown, and it appears to be drifting without power." Sam made the decision that would change human history. "Set course for the derelict vessel. We need to find out who built it and what happened to them." As the Aurora approached the alien ship, they could see that it was much larger than their scout vessel. The hull was made of some kind of silver metal that reflected light in strange patterns, and the overall design was elegant in a way that human ships were not. It looked like art and engineering combined into something beautiful. "I am detecting life signs aboard that ship," Dr. Foster announced with excitement in her voice. "Faint, but definitely there. Whatever species built this vessel, some of them are still alive." Before Sam could decide what to do next, Ben's tactical display lit up with warning signals. "Captain, 3 more ships just appeared on sensors. They are approaching fast and their weapons are charging." The new arrivals were different from the elegant derelict ship. These vessels looked like they had been built for war, with thick armor plating and multiple weapon systems. They moved in formation like hunters closing in on prey. "The damaged ship is trying to communicate," Lisa announced. "I cannot understand the language, but the tone sounds like a distress call." Sam realized what was happening. The beautiful ship was trying to escape from the warships, but it was too damaged to run. In a few minutes, the hunters would destroy their prey, and the Aurora would witness the first alien contact in human history turn into a massacre. "This is Captain Rodriguez to all stations," Sam announced over the ship's communication system. "We are about to make first contact with alien species, and it looks like we are walking into the middle of a war. I will not stand by and watch innocent beings get murdered. All hands prepare for combat." Maya Thompson immediately began rerouting power from non-essential systems to the engines and weapons. She had designed many of the Aurora's systems herself, and she knew how to push them beyond their normal limits. "I can give you 20% more speed and firepower, but only for a short time before the systems overload." Ben Walsh activated the ship's defensive systems and loaded the weapon bays with everything they had. The Aurora was not a warship, but it carried enough firepower to defend itself against pirates or hostile wildlife. "Weapons ready, Captain, but those alien ships are much bigger than us." Dr. Foster was already preparing the medical bay to treat wounded aliens whose physiology she knew nothing about. She had studied every form of life on Earth, but this would be the ultimate test of her skills as a doctor. "I will do my best to help any survivors we can rescue." The Aurora accelerated toward the damaged alien vessel, just as the enemy warships opened fire. Beams of red energy lanced through space, and the elegant ship's hull began to glow and melt under the assault. But before the killing blow could be delivered, the small human scout ship positioned itself between the attacker and victim. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Sam Rodriguez of the Earthship Aurora," Sam broadcast on all frequencies. "Cease your attack immediately. We are claiming the system under interstellar law and demanding that you withdraw." The alien warships paused their attack, probably trying to figure out what kind of species would be foolish enough to challenge 3 heavily armed vessels with a single small ship. In that moment of confusion, Sam ordered his crew to launch their own attack. The Aurora's weapons were not designed to destroy ships as large as the alien warships, but they did not need to destroy them. Ben Walsh targeted their engine systems while Maya Thompson used the scout ship's superior speed to dart between the larger vessels like an angry insect. Every time the aliens tried to lock their weapons onto the Aurora, the human ship had already moved to a new position. "Their tactics make no sense," one of the alien commanders probably said to another. "Why would such a small ship attack us? Do they have a death wish?" But Sam's tactics were working. The enemy ships were so busy trying to swat the annoying human vessel that they stopped firing on the damaged ship. This gave the elegant vessel time to begin emergency repairs and attempt to escape. Dr. Foster was monitoring the alien life signs when she noticed something important. "Captain, I think the beings on that damaged ship are trying to help us. They are using their remaining power to jam the enemy sensors. Working together without being able to communicate, the humans and the unknown aliens managed to drive off the attacking warships. The enemy vessels retreated when they realized that their prey had found an unexpected protector, and the immediate crisis was over. As the Aurora docked with the damaged alien vessel, Sam Rodriguez became the first human being to shake hands with an alien. The being was tall and thin with silver skin and large eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Through gestures and simple drawings, they began the slow process of learning to communicate. The alien's name was something like Zexhai, and he was a commander in something called the Altarian Fleet. His people had been fleeing from enemies called the Keth when their ship was damaged. He could not believe that the strange newcomers had risked their lives to save complete strangers. When Zexhai finally understood that the humans had never met aliens before and had no idea what they were getting involved in, his respect for them grew even stronger. These beings had seen injustice and immediately chosen to fight against it. Even though they knew nothing about the politics or dangers of galactic civilization, news of the encounter spread quickly through both the human fleet and the alien communication networks. Somewhere in the galaxy, species that had been fighting each other for centuries heard about newcomers who fought not for conquest or resources, but simply because they believed it was the right thing to do. Commander Zexhai stood before the Galactic Council and tried to explain what he had witnessed. The other representatives listened with growing skepticism as he described the human vessel that had saved his ship from certain destruction. How could beings with such primitive technology challenge the mighty Keth Empire and survive? You claim these humans positioned their small ship between you and 3 Keth destroyers, said High Scholar Yathara. That would be tactical suicide for any known species. Are you certain you did not hallucinate during your ordeal? Zexhai activated his personal recorder and played the battle footage for the assembled council. They watched in stunned silence as the tiny human ship darted between the massive Keth vessels like a fighter defending its nest. The human tactics made no sense according to standard military doctrine, yet somehow they worked. Notice how they use their smaller size as an advantage, Zexhai pointed out. Instead of trying to match the enemy's firepower, they make themselves impossible to target effectively. They turn their weakness into strength. Before the council could debate further, emergency alarms began sounding throughout the crystal towers. A massive holographic display showed dozens of red warning signals across 3 different star systems. The war between the Keth Empire and Vorlon Confederacy had escalated dramatically, with civilian populations caught in the crossfire. In the Outer Rim, Colonel Rick Stevens received an urgent distress call aboard the human assault ship Defiant. A civilian transport carrying refugees from a destroyed colony was under attack by Keth raiders. The transport had no weapons and would be destroyed within minutes unless someone intervened. How many enemy ships are we talking about? Stevens asked his tactical officer. Sergeant Lisa Morgan checked her instruments. 8 Keth fighters and 2 boarding ships. The raiders are planning to capture the civilians for slave labor. Stevens made his decision without hesitation. All hands prepare for boarding action. We are going to take those raider ships and free the prisoners. The Defiant approached the battle zone at maximum speed, instead of engaging the enemy ships in traditional space combat. Stevens ordered his pilot to ram directly into the largest raider vessel. The human ship's reinforced hull punched through the alien armor like a spear through paper. Boarding teams, go, 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 Stevens shouted as his soldiers prepared to enter the enemy ship through the hole they had just created. Corporal Danny Evans led the first team into the Keth vessel. The raiders were expecting to fight other species who followed predictable combat patterns, but the humans fought like nothing they had ever encountered. Evans used the ship's narrow corridors to his advantage, setting up ambush points that turned the raiders' superior numbers into a liability. Medic Susan Phillips followed behind the assault teams, treating wounded civilians as soon as areas were secured. She worked on 3 different alien species simultaneously, using her medical knowledge to adapt human first aid techniques to alien physiology. Her compassion for beings she had never seen before impressed even the hardened Keth raiders who witnessed her work. The battle in space was unlike anything in galactic military history. Human soldiers fought with a flexibility that confused their enemies. When their weapons ran out of ammunition, they used pieces of the ship itself as clubs. When corridors were too narrow for normal tactics, they crawled through ventilation systems to attack from unexpected directions. These creatures are insane, one Keth raider reported to his commander. They fight like cornered animals, but they also show mercy to wounded enemies. I do not understand their logic. The confusion worked in humanity's favor. Keth military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and intimidation, but the humans refused to be intimidated. Instead, they turned every disadvantage into an opportunity and every setback into a reason to fight harder. Lieutenant Amy Patterson was piloting her fighter Falcon when she encountered Drakmor the Ruthless, the Keth Empire's most famous ace pilot. Drakmor had destroyed over 200 enemy ships in personal combat and had never been defeated. He expected this new opponent to follow standard fighter tactics, making his victory a simple matter of superior experience and firepower. But Amy Patterson had learned to fly by racing through asteroid fields near Earth for fun. She treated the space battle like a 3-dimensional puzzle, where the goal was not to destroy the enemy, but to make them destroy themselves. Her fighter spun and twisted through attack patterns that made no tactical sense, but somehow kept her alive while Drakmor's more powerful ship struggled to target her. "Stand still and fight with honor," Drakmor demanded over the communication channel. "Honor does not help dead pilots," Amy replied as she used a nearby asteroid to block his missile attack. The duel lasted for 20 minutes, far longer than any previous engagement Drakmor had fought. Every time he thought he had the human pilot cornered, She found a way to escape that he had not considered possible. Finally, in frustration, he made a mistake that Amy had been waiting for. His ship flew too close to the asteroid field while chasing her, and she used the gravitational pull of the rocks to slingshot behind him and disable his engines. Instead of destroying his helpless ship, Amy Patterson did something that shocked the watching Keth fleet. She offered Drakmore medical assistance and safe passage to the nearest Keth base. Her mercy toward a defeated enemy became the subject of songs and stories throughout both fleets. Meanwhile, Dr. Paul Anderson was studying battle reports from human engagements across the war zone. As chief strategist aboard the command vessel Horizon, he had access to detailed information about how different species fought each other. What he discovered changed his understanding of galactic warfare. Every species in this galaxy has been fighting the same way for centuries, he explained to Admiral Blake during their daily briefing. They rely on superior technology, overwhelming numbers, or individual combat prowess. But they have forgotten the most important element of warfare: unpredictability. Anderson had been a military historian before joining the space program, and he saw patterns in galactic combat that reminded him of ancient battles on Earth. The Keth fought like medieval knights, relying on heavy armor and frontal assaults. The Vorlons were more like classical armies, using coordinated formations and siege tactics. Both approaches were effective but predictable. We need to teach our allies that warfare is not just about weapons and numbers, Anderson continued. It is about making your enemy react to your choices instead of forcing you to react to theirs. His tactical innovations began spreading through the human fleet and their alien allies. Species that had been locked in stalemate for generations suddenly found themselves capable of victories they had never imagined possible. The humans served as teachers, showing other beings how to think beyond their traditional limitations. The legend of humanity grew with each battle report. They were called the Ghost Warriors, who appeared from nowhere and vanished before enemy reinforcements could respond. Some species began to worship them as harbingers of a new age, while others feared they represented the end of the old galactic order. But in the refugee camps and hospital ships, the humans were known by a different name. They were called the Guardians, the beings who fought not for conquest or glory, but to protect those who could not protect themselves. Wounded soldiers from dozens of species had been saved by human medics. Civilian populations had been evacuated by human ships, whose crews risked their lives for complete strangers. The Galactic Council finally admitted what many had begun to suspect. The legendary humans were real, they were here, and they were changing everything. The old patterns of galactic warfare were breaking down as species learned new ways to fight, new reasons to fight, and most importantly, new reasons to stop fighting. In the crystal towers of Centauri Prime, High Scholar Yathara updated the ancient archives with new entries about humanity. These were no longer myths and legends, but historical records of a species that turned war into art and art into hope. The galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Blake walked into the great assembly hall of the Galactic Council, wearing the simple blue uniform of the human Space Force. Around him sat representatives from dozens of species, beings who had been fighting each other for centuries but were now willing to listen to the newcomers who had changed the nature of galactic warfare in just a few months. We offer our assistance not as conquerors seeking territory, but as neighbors seeking peace, Blake announced to the assembled delegates. Humanity asks for 3 things in return: star charts to help us explore safely, technology exchanges to help us help you more effectively, and most importantly, a commitment to end the targeting of civilian populations. The Vorlon representative, a tall being with crystalline skin, spoke first. Your species has proven effective in small engagements, but the siege of Thessia 7 involves 12 million civilians trapped on a planet surrounded by Keth battle fleets. How could even your unconventional tactics break such a massive military formation? Blake smiled. We have learned that the most effective way to break a siege is not to attack the besiegers, but to make them want to leave. Major Kevin Turner stood on the bridge of his command ship and looked at the mixed fleet assembled around him. Human vessels flew alongside Altarian cruisers, Vorlon destroyers, and ships from 6 other species. This was the largest joint military operation in galactic history, and it depended on beings who had been enemies learning to work together as allies. Navigation Officer Martinez, report our position, Turner ordered. Grace Martinez checked her instruments while coordinating with Quindal, the Altarian sensor specialist who had requested assignment to a human ship. "We are 3 hours from Thessia 7, sir. The Keth blockade is holding position exactly where our intelligence predicted." Turner nodded and opened communication channels to all ships in the fleet. "This is Major Turner to all vessels. Remember that our goal is not to destroy the enemy fleet, but to convince them that maintaining their siege costs more than it benefits them. Each species will use their natural advantages, but we coordinate as one unified force." The plan that Dr. Paul Anderson had developed was unlike any military operation in galactic history. Instead of trying to punch through the Keth blockade with superior firepower, the joint fleet would attack the siege from multiple angles simultaneously, making it impossible for the enemy to concentrate their defenses effectively. Tony Rodriguez, the human communications specialist, worked with Sirith, a Vorlon intelligence officer who had volunteered for the dangerous mission. Together they had developed a new type of psychological warfare that took advantage of what they had learned about Keth military culture. "The Keth respect strength above all else," Sirith explained. "But they also fear losing face in front of their own troops. If we can make their commanders appear weak or indecisive, their own soldiers will begin to question the wisdom of continuing the siege." The attack began with small human ships appearing throughout the Keth formation, like ghosts materializing from empty space. These scout vessels did not engage in direct combat, but instead broadcast messages on Keth military frequencies, challenging individual commanders to single combat and questioning their courage when they refused. "This is Captain Eddie Foster of the stealth ship. Shadow to Keth Commander Vortak," came one typical message. "Your blockade prevents medical supplies from reaching sick children. Does the mighty Keth Empire make war on infants? Prove your honor by facing me in single combat." The psychological pressure worked exactly as Anderson had predicted. Keth commanders began breaking formation to chase after individual human ships, trying to restore their honor by destroying these insulting small vessels. But the human ships led their pursuers into carefully prepared ambush zones where the joint fleet's heavier vessels waited. Meanwhile, Dr. Jennifer Walsh was conducting the most dangerous part of the operation. Her team had infiltrated the Keth command ship disguised as neutral diplomats offering to negotiate prisoner exchanges. Walsh had spent weeks studying Keth psychology and culture, learning how their warrior mindset could be turned against them. War Master Kethran, "I bring an offer from the civilian government of Thessia 7, she announced as she stood before the massive alien commander. "They wish to surrender the planet to your forces, but their honor requires that you prove your strength by defeating their champions in personal combat." Kethran laughed with a sound like grinding metal. What champions could these weak farmers provide that would challenge Keth warriors? Walsh smiled politely. "They have requested that their champions be chosen from among the humans who have been interfering in your siege. Surely the mighty Keth Empire is not afraid of fighting the legendary ghost warriors in fair combat." The challenge was perfect bait for the Keth warrior culture. Kethran could not refuse without appearing cowardly to his own troops. But accepting meant dividing his attention between maintaining the siege and preparing for individual duels with human fighters. Captain Eddie? Foster led his team through the Keth detention facility on the moon, orbiting Thessia 7. The Shadow had landed under cover of a sensor jamming field, and Foster's soldiers moved through the prison complex using techniques they had learned from studying Earth's military history. "Remember, we are not here to win a battle," Foster whispered to his team as they prepared to rescue the prisoners. "We are here to prove that no prison can hold those who refuse to give up hope." The Keth guards were expecting attacks from the front, using standard galactic military tactics. They were not prepared for human soldiers who crawled through ventilation systems, hid in storage closets, and used the prison's own security systems against the guards. Sergeant Lisa Morgan disabled the main power grid, while her team freed prisoners from dozens of different species. Many of the aliens had been imprisoned for months or years and were weak from poor treatment, but the humans carried them to safety with the same determination they showed in combat. "Why do you risk your lives for us?" asked one elderly Vorlon prisoner as Morgan helped him toward the evacuation point. "Your species owes us nothing." Morgan paused in her work just long enough to look the old being in the eyes. "Because it is the right thing to do. That is reason enough." The prison break was discovered just as the main battle reached its climax. General Patricia Hayes, commanding the joint fleet from her flagship, watched as her carefully coordinated plan came together like pieces of a vast puzzle. The Keth siege force found themselves fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. Their commanders were distracted by honor duels with human pilots. Their supply lines were being attacked by stealth ships they could not catch. Their prison facilities were in revolt as freed prisoners joined the fight against their former captors. Most importantly, the 12 million civilians on Thessia 7 were being evacuated by a massive fleet of civilian ships that had appeared during the confusion of battle. The humans had contacted every merchant, transport, and passenger vessel in 3 star systems, convincing them to risk their lives in a rescue mission that would save an entire world's population. "This is impossible," Kethran declared as he watched his perfect siege falling apart. "How can these humans coordinate so many different elements simultaneously? No species has this kind of organizational ability." His second-in-command provided the answer that would change Keth military thinking forever. "Perhaps, Warmaster, they succeed because they do not fight for conquest or glory. They fight for the survival of others, and that gives them strength we cannot match." The siege of Thessia 7 was broken not by superior firepower, but by superior organization and the willingness of dozens of species to work together toward a common goal. The Keth fleet retreated in confusion, unable to understand how their overwhelming advantage had been turned into a humiliating defeat. In the aftermath, as medical ships tended to wounded soldiers and civilian transports carried refugees to safety, Admiral Blake received a message that would change the course of galactic history. It came from the highest levels of both the Keth Empire and the Vorlon Confederacy. Both sides wanted to meet with human representatives to discuss ending the war. After 3 centuries of pointless conflict, the introduction of human tactics and human values had shown them that there might be another way to resolve their differences. The legend of humanity had evolved from mysterious ghost warriors to something even more powerful. Proof that species could work together, that wars could be won through mercy rather than cruelty, and that the strongest force in the galaxy was not weapons or technology but the simple refusal to abandon those in need. Standing on the bridge of his flagship and looking out at the mixed fleet of human and alien vessels working together to rebuild what the war had destroyed, Blake knew that they had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not conquered their enemies. They had converted them into allies. The Nexus Gate was the largest artificial structure in the known galaxy, a massive space station that controlled the faster-than-light travel routes connecting thousands of star systems. Built by an ancient civilization and maintained by the combined efforts of dozens of species, it was the perfect neutral ground for the most important peace negotiations in galactic history. Commander Steve Davis watched through the viewports of the diplomatic vessel Peacekeeper as representatives from the Keth Empire and Vorlon Confederacy arrived at the station. After 3 centuries of warfare, both sides had agreed to meet with human mediators to discuss ending their conflict. The sight of former enemies docking at the same station without shooting each other was already a victory of sorts. Admiral Blake's sacrifice at Thessia 7 convinced both sides that humans fight for principles rather than profit, explained Dr. Karen White, the chief diplomatic officer. "They believe we can be trusted to mediate fairly, because we have no territorial ambitions in this region of space." Davis nodded as he reviewed the security reports. His team included veterans from the major human engagements: pilot Rachel Green, who had survived the Battle of Centauri; Security Chief Matt Brown, whose innovative tactics had saved thousands of refugees; and Communications Specialist Alex Johnson, who could speak 17 alien languages fluently. "The problem is not the official delegates," Davis said grimly. "Our intelligence reports suggest that extremist factions from both sides plan to sabotage these negotiations. They would rather continue fighting than admit that peace is possible." Dr. White had spent months studying the histories and cultures of both the Keth and Vorlon civilizations. She understood that for many individuals on both sides, the war had become their entire identity. Peace threatened not just their military careers but their sense of who they were as people. War Master Sektar represents the Keth, hardliners who believe that accepting human mediation shows weakness, she explained. On the Vorlon side, Admiral Tirona leads a faction that considers humans to be dangerous wildcards who threaten the established galactic order. Both groups see us as a bigger threat than their traditional enemies. The peace talks began in the station's central conference chamber, a vast room designed to accommodate beings of many different sizes and atmospheric requirements. Human mediators sat between the two delegations, with translation devices working frantically to convert concepts that had no equivalent between species. The Keth Empire demands reparations for 300 years of Vorlon aggression, declared the official Keth representative, a diplomat whose scarred armor showed he had been a warrior before becoming a negotiator. The Vorlon Confederacy requires guarantees that Keth expansion will be permanently limited to prevent future conflicts, countered his Vorlon counterpart, a being whose crystalline features reflected the conference room lights like a living prism. Davis and his team worked patiently through each demand and counteroffer, finding common ground where none seemed to exist. They used techniques developed through centuries of human diplomacy, but adapted for alien psychology and culture. Progress was slow but steady, with both sides gradually accepting compromises they would have rejected just months earlier. But outside the conference chamber, Sektar and Tirona were meeting in secret. The Keth War Master and Vorlon Admiral had been enemies for decades, but they now shared a common goal: eliminating the human influence that threatened their way of life. These humans have corrupted the purity of warfare, Sektar growled as he examined tactical displays of the joint fleet positioned around the nexus gate. They make soldiers think about mercy and civilians when they should focus only on victory. Tyrona's crystalline features glowed, with cold light as she agreed. They have shown our people that cooperation is possible, which makes our traditional authority structures obsolete. If peace breaks out, what need will there be for professional warriors and military commanders? Their plan was elegant and ruthless. Extremist ships from both fleets would simultaneously attack the peace conference, making it appear that the other side had betrayed the negotiations. In the resulting chaos, moderates on both sides would be discredited, and the war faction leaders could resume the conflict with greater popular support than ever before. The attack began during the third day of negotiations, just as Davis thought they were making real progress toward a comprehensive peace treaty. Alarms throughout the Nexus Gate announced that hostile ships were approaching from multiple directions. "This is Security Chief Brown to all stations." Matt's voice echoed through the station's communication system. "We have 18 Keth fighters and 15 Vorlon assault ships converging on our position. All defensive systems are activating." Lieutenant Alex Johnson was coordinating evacuation procedures when he realized the true scope of the crisis. "Commander Davis, the attacking ships are not trying to capture the station or rescue their own delegates. They are trying to destroy the entire conference and make it look like the other side broke the ceasefire." Davis made the decision that would define his career and possibly determine the future of galactic civilization. "All human vessels form a defensive perimeter around the Nexus Gate. Do not fire on the attacking ships unless they continue advancing after we warn them off. Our job is to protect everyone here, including the extremists who want to kill us." The battle around the Nexus Gate became the most important engagement in human military history, not because of its size or the technology involved, but because of what it represented. Human ships positioned themselves between the attacking extremists and the space station. Absorbing damage meant for the peace negotiators. Engineer Maria Santos worked desperately to keep the station's life support systems operational as explosions rocked the massive structure. Her team included aliens from 6 different species, all working together to save the lives of beings they had never met before. "Hull breach on level 7, reported one of her Altarian assistants. "Atmospheric pressure dropping rapidly in the civilian quarters. Reroute emergency power to the backup life support systems," Santos ordered, as she sealed the breach with portable equipment. "No one dies on my watch, regardless of which species they belong to." Dr. Chris Thompson set up emergency medical stations throughout the damaged sections of the Nexus Gate. His patients included wounded delegates, station personnel, and even some of the extremist attackers whose ships had been disabled by defensive fire. "Doctor, this being tried to kill us 20 minutes ago," protested one of his human medical assistants as Thompson worked to save the life of a wounded Keth pilot. "20 minutes ago, he was our enemy," Thompson replied as he continued his work. "Right now, he is my patient. The war ends here, in this medical bay, when we choose to treat former enemies as future friends. The battle reached its climax when Admiral Blake, who had survived the siege of Thessia 7 and commanded the human fleet protecting the peace conference, received reports that the extremist alliance was preparing to ram explosive-loaded ships directly into the conference chamber. "Sir, if those ships impact the station, everyone in the peace talks will be killed," reported his tactical officer. "The explosion will also damage the Nexus Gate's control systems, potentially stranding thousands of ships throughout the galaxy." Blake looked around the bridge of his flagship at crew members who had followed him through dozens of battles. They were exhausted, their ship was damaged, and they were outnumbered by enemies who were willing to die to prevent peace from breaking out. "This is Admiral Blake to all ships," he announced on an open channel that reached both the human fleet and the extremist attackers. "We came to the stars not as conquerors but as gardeners. We plant the seeds of peace in soil watered by sacrifice. To the extremists who would destroy what we have built together, you will have to go through us first." The Admiral's flagship, already heavily damaged from previous battles, positioned itself directly between the suicide ships and the space station. Other human vessels joined the formation, creating a wall of ships that could not stop the attack, but could absorb enough of its force to save the conference. The extremist commanders found themselves facing a choice they had not anticipated. They could complete their mission by destroying the peace conference, but only by first killing the beings who had risked everything to protect strangers. The humans were offering them a clear shot at their target, but at the cost of proving that their cause required murdering heroes. One by one, the extremist ships stopped their attack runs. Keth warriors who had dedicated their lives to combat could not bring themselves to kill opponents who fought with such honor. Vorlon tactical specialists who prized logical thinking realized that destroying the humans would make them martyrs rather than obstacles. Warmaster Sektar was the first to power down his weapons. "I cannot destroy beings who fight like true Keth warriors, even if they were not born Keth." Admiral Tirona followed moments later. "The humans have demonstrated that peace requires more courage than war. To kill them now would prove that we are cowards, not patriots." The extremist alliance crumbled in the face of human determination. Both the Keth Empire and Vorlon Confederacy began arresting their own hardliners,